Hello, welcome to next episode of the podcast Next Creators. Today we have Gabby Dizon from Yield Guild. Thank you for joining.
Hey, Sasha, thanks for having me.
Maybe we can start by you mentioning what is Yield Guild and what do you focus on in this space?
Sure. So, Yield Guild is what we call a play to earn gaming guild. So, what that means is that we're a community of players set up as a DAO, and then we invest in NFTs of different play to earn games, meaning games that allow the player to earn some kind of cryptocurrency as rewards. So, most notably, Axie Infinity, though there are lots of other games as well. And then the DAO itself, the guild, invests in these NFTs and then lends them out to our player base, so that people can come and play these games without having to invest any upfront cost in buying these NFTs. So that's kind of the really basic thing about the guild. We are around 50,000 strong right now, and always looking at more games to play.
Nice. And maybe we can also start with your background. I know you've been working on game development for many years before coming into crypto. So maybe we can start by where did you grow up? How did you get involved into gaming?
Sure. So I grew up in Manila in the Philippines, and I've always been a gamer. The first console I got was a Commodore VIC-20 from my dad when he returned home from a trip to the U.S. And growing up, I always had PCs. Like my dad didn't give us other consoles like Nintendo or Xbox because they wanted us to do other things other than playing games. So I was playing a lot of games, but I was also doing programming from a very young age. So it's really steeped in computers, and I knew that I wanted to make games growing up. And when I graduated from university, and this is in 2000, there were no game developers in the Philippines. So I started out as a web programmer. And then I eventually joined what became the first game studio in the Philippines in 2003, and was part of the team that made the first game there. So yeah, I've been a game developer for 18 years now, and most notably in 2014 started a mobile game studio, Altitude Games. So Altitude Games is still around. We're making mobile games for Android and iOS phones, and yeah, that's the background.
That's cool. And since you started working in gaming at the time, what was the evolution of gaming from your perspective? Kind of starting with PC, internet, with mobile.
Yeah, no, games have changed a lot, and I think every decade has seen some form of massive shift. When I started as a gamer, games were shareware, right? Meaning that you could download several levels of a game, and then you had to pay to download like the rest. So this was popular in the 90s, and then 2000s there was a shift towards like online games, MMOs, and then 2010s mobile became popular, and then free to play became a dominant business model. So we've really seen a lot of shifts in the industry, and every decade like a new business model comes along.
Hmm. And how did you get involved in crypto? Do you remember when was it? What was the first encounter with crypto?
Yeah, it was during the 2017 bull market. So I'd been aware of Bitcoin because my friends were in the fintech space, so we're doing some Bitcoin startups. But the primary use case was around remittance in the Philippines, which wasn't really something that interested me. So it wasn't until we learned about Ethereum and smart contracts in 2017 that we started getting into it. So we started taking a look at, how could smart contracts, programmable money, possibly change the game industry. So we were trying to get ahead of the curve of the rest of the industry and see how blockchain could potentially change how games are made. So we were playing with a few things like currency in games, for example, or payment methods. And then it was during this time that CryptoKitties came out of ETH Waterloo in November 2017. It crashed the Ethereum network then, and then popularized the non fungible token, and that was such an aha moment for us. It was like, wow, you can put unique objects on chain. And yeah, so NFTs really became something I fell in love with, and I've been very deep in the NFT space since 2018.
Hmm. And what were also some of the learnings from that era, like kind of like early days of crypto, 2017, 2018, 2019?
Yeah, so we were talking a lot about the, I would say, theoretical use cases that would be popular. So a lot of the common themes back then were just talking about the true ownership, the interoperability, for example, but it wasn't being followed by real world examples. So it really took a while for actually real games to come on, and even the games that are popular now, like Axie, for example, they started in 2018, and it's not until almost 3 years later that they're hitting their stride. So I think one of the lessons is that for games specifically, there's a lag time between the initial technological innovation and when really good products start coming to market. I think it's only now, for example, now that Axie is popular, we're seeing a lot of AAA teams with a lot of game industry experience starting to get interested in making play to earn games. So it's probably not until maybe 12 to 18 months from now that we're going to see these titles emerge. So that's the thing about, I guess, the game industry is that when a piece of technology comes out, people get interested. There's a little bit of experimentation, and then people get, I would say, disappointed that like there's no good kind of real world use case. But after a while, something really good emerges, and then things take off.
Hmm. And maybe you can also mention about Axie and this play to earn aspect of it, because it's fairly new still to the industry. So how do you think about play to earn? What's unique about it?
Sure. So Axie pioneered play to earn with creating an in-game currency, in this case SLP, as a reward token. So SLP itself, it's dynamically generated. A player, when they win a game inside Axie, they create SLP, and then they burn SLP when they breed two new Axies to create a new one. So this is the really important part of an economy, in that a resource is being generated that has a corresponding use case or a utility inside the game. If there was no utility, if you just generated SLP, then nobody would be buying it, which means it wouldn't have any value. So interestingly, Axie tied the creation of new Axies, and you need three Axies to form a team to start playing the game. You need these Axies, and you need SLP to breed them, and the breeding is generate. I mean the SLP is generated by winning games. So now people had to come in and contribute to the player network, the player liquidity, by actually winning games to create the SLP, which drives the amount of SLP being created, and drives the amount of SLP being burned, because they're being bred to serve new users. So this is super interesting. The other, I would say, innovation of that is that SLP is an in-game resource that is externalized as a cryptocurrency. Now, when it becomes a cryptocurrency or an ERC20 token, then you can start doing so many things with it. It can interact with a host of DeFi applications. So first, from Uniswap, for example, you can change the SLP to ETH, and then now people can change it to fiat. And yeah, that's really what spurred the innovation of Play to Earn.
Hmm. I see. And in terms of the usage of Axie specifically, you mentioned that there was quite a bit of lag from where it started to maybe like December of last year, like late last year, a huge spike in usage. It kind of like went vertical. What do you think was the main kind of catalyst for this?
Okay, so the main catalyst was actually COVID and people being stuck at home. So this was happening actually around this time, like August last year. During the early part of the lockdown, a lot of people in my home country, in the rural part of Philippines, they found Axie as a way to earn money while being stuck at home and laid off and having no income from the physical world. And to their surprise, they found out that they were making multiple times their income from the jobs that they have before they were laid off. So the very interesting thing here is that these people were introduced to the crypto economy via a game. They didn't know blockchain beforehand. They downloaded the game and then started playing, started earning SLP, and then figured out how to use crypto from there, use a wallet, use MetaMask, use Uniswap, for example, and kind of interact with DeFi.
Hmm. And in terms of geography, so you mentioned Philippines is a big market. I heard also Indonesia is a big market. What are some of the other areas where it became like really popular?
Yeah, a lot of the geos that we're popular in are across Southeast Asia and Latin America. I guess there's a similarity in that the average wages are low compared to the income that you can get from the game. So, for example, we're in Philippines, we're in Indonesia, Thailand, India, and then across Latin America, we're in Venezuela, Colombia, Brazil, and a few others.
I was wondering, so how did you go from Axie Infinity and being involved there early on into Yield Guild? When did the concept for Yield Guild started?
Okay, so something really interesting started happening at around the same time that SLP farming started becoming popular. So at first, people were buying Axies to farm SLP, but a lot of people showed up who wanted to play the game but actually couldn't afford to buy the Axies upfront. And some of the community members realized that you can do a sort of trustless lending of your Axies, because there's a quirk of the Axie architecture in that there's two types of login: a username password login and a wallet login. Now I can give you my username and password. You can log into the game using my account, play with my Axis, and start earning SLP. But you can't run away with the Axis or the SLP because you don't have access to the private key. So that was how the scholarship system program was born. People with excess Axis started lending out accounts to other people who wanted to play the game but couldn't afford it, and this became a really good way to onboard a lot of new users into Axie Infinity because they wanted to earn. And the scholarship program, where people with I would say excess resources were able to lend it out and match with people who had time but no money to buy the Axis themselves. They could come in and play, and cost wasn't a barrier. So I saw that happening, and it was something that was very cool. And I realized that this was something that you could do on a scalable level, where you could build an automated program. For example, everything was being done manually in terms of sending Axis, syncing the SLP, collecting it, doing the revenue share. So we decided to automate this, and then also because and raise venture capital so that you could acquire NFTs more quickly and then breed more quickly. And that was the insight that led to the founding of Yield Guild.
Nice. And how did it evolve since then, since you noticed this and kind of like decided to scale it?
Right. So yeah, it's been a crazy 10 months. So we started Yield Guild in October last year, and now we're a community of around 50,000 gamers. Almost 5,000 of that are Axie scholars on our end. We've started investing in assets in 11 games so far. So for example, we're in Formula One Delta Time, Rev Racing, Sandbox, Guild of Guardians, Ember Sword. Most recently, Nifty Island as well. And now we have what is the equivalent of an early stage investment team looking to invest in tokens and NFTs of these new games to offer to our community. We've also built up an esports team, starting with Axie Infinity. We're actually hosting our Yield Guild Open tournament soon. So esports is a way for people to go from just farming the game to go into a competitive level and become a champion, earn some reward. So it's something that is very aspirational for our players. And yeah, and then since then we've covered a lot of Southeast Asia and South America, and also launched the YGG token.
Wow. And how would you able to scale into like such large numbers of the community? Like I would imagine that's the biggest challenge. Like how big is your team today at Yield Guild, and how does the scaling part kind of work?
Yeah, so the core team itself is um, yeah, the core team itself is around, I would say, less than 15 people, and the community is 50,000. The There's a lot of people who are so passionate about play to earn that it actually hasn't been a challenge for us to really onboard new users. The challenge had more been, how do we arrange our community, our Discord, our moderation, so that people are kind of guided appropriately to what they want to do. Do they want a scholarship? Do they want to talk about different games? There are over 30 games that you can discuss in Yield Guild, for example. There's some social elements of what people can do: just hang out in the guild. They sing karaoke every week, for example, in the Discord. They participate in events. They do raids in different games. So yeah, there's a lot of different things you do while part of the community.
That's super interesting. And do you see the people who are being onboarded into Yield Guild and starting with the first game, do you see this as almost like entry point into crypto, in that people kind of like stick around, they want to explore other games, maybe they want to learn other aspects of crypto? You mentioned like maybe some people would use like Uniswap and other things. So do you see it as a actual like entry point into crypto?
Yeah, absolutely. Most of the new guild members coming in are gamers first, and a lot of them actually it's their first time interacting with crypto in any manner. So a lot of what we're doing is educational in how people are onboarded to crypto, especially like when you go into a Discord and it's full of new users. There's a lot of scammers that come in and try to get people to reveal their private keys via phishing sites and all of that. So there's a lot of like focus on community and education, so that people are don't fall prey to a lot of these scams that befall the people who are new to crypto. But yeah, that's the amazing thing that for me with what we're doing with community is that we're really becoming the entry point of gamers into crypto, and then they learn so much about how to interact with crypto afterwards.
hmm And also, congrats on recent funding to the extent that you can kind of share on it. Like, what kinds of things you would be doing with the funding?
Oh, so a lot of our funding is really in extending our reach of play to earn. So on the Axie side, it's breeding a lot more Axie so that we can cover more scholars. We're at 5,000 ish now, and we want to be at least 15,000 before the end of the year. But on our end, like how do we get to a million scholars, for example? How do we get to 5 million, 10 million? We really want to scale this in a way and offer this to the rest of the world. And yeah, we're also investing heavily in other games like Splinterlands, for example. We have a very vibrant community, and that game is starting to really pick up. So we don't think that players will just want to play one game. They want to have different experiences in the metaverse, and we want to be able to offer them like a lot of those different experiences.
hmm And sounds like there is like this also new aspect of gaming or generally crypto applications in that there is shared community in a way. So you have this Discord with all these people, but they actually play different things, right? So they're kind of like almost like share. There's a shared community aspect of things, right?
Yeah, yeah, very much so.
Interesting. And now, if you think about also like Web3 gaming overall and where it will evolve, do you see the kind of narrow band of use cases for Web3 gaming, or do you think it will kind of like open up? There will be like all kinds of use cases for Web3 gaming.
So Web3 gaming is super exciting for me because I think it blends both like gaming and the future of work and the introduction of DeFi into games as well. So I think these are the building blocks of what we are calling the metaverse. Just basically a set of shared online live experiences that people can go into that are virtual, with different interfaces. It might be a website, it might be a 3D game, it might be a VR, and people will be able to earn value. So it could be earning tokens or NFTs out of these experiences. So yeah, that kind of like metaverse thesis is something that I'm really excited about and building towards, and we want to be the one of the core building blocks of that at Yield Guild, in the sense that we are bringing the human capital to the blockchain so that we can populate the metaverse with people.
hmm And do you also think about now? I assume there's like a lot more interest in larger game studios in the space now. They kind of like want to learn more about the space. So do you see it evolving mostly through indies, through like bottoms up when it comes to game development, or do you see like larger studios actually making a move sooner than later?
So we've been talking to both indies and larger studios. I think it's going to be a lot harder for larger studios to get into this space because there's a lot of, I would say, perceived regulatory risk on their end, especially around introducing a token, especially if they're a public company with large legal departments and might be a target for, any kind of lawsuit from shareholders. So the more nimble teams, the indie teams are able to innovate a lot faster in the space because they're innovating in a space that's completely new. And then like it's the same with crypto, right? The newer companies were able to build up a big presence like Coinbase instead of a traditional bank. So I see the same thing happening in the game side. It might be that some of the new game developers are actually coming from the big companies, but expect to see a new set of companies or crypto networks dominate crypto gaming.
hmm Got it. And in terms of the use cases for the games, do you see people almost trying to like retrofit the new model with the old games, or do you see mostly mashups, kind of like brand new games, such as, for example, like dungeon crawlers, where you have like automatically generated level that one becomes NFT, for example?
There's a lot of exploration happening, and I do expect a lot of games to come in, especially from the more experienced and professional game developers, to be more of the genres that were popular in the last decade. So yeah, there's a dungeon crawler coming. There's like a fantasy MMO. There are space shooters. We're gonna see like just a lot of these different genres come in and just add the layer of blockchain and economic value in them.
And do you see also maybe some educational gaps around game developers jumping in the space, but maybe like still missing some components about like what is this economy that I need to kind of figure out? What are the mechanics around this? How to do community first kind of game development? Or do you see that people kind of like fairly intuitively understanding the space relatively quickly?
So usually people are coming into it from two camps. You're either crypto first and you understand community really well, you understand tokenomics, but maybe your game development and polish isn't so good. And on the other side, we're seeing like professional teams who've shipped multiple games before, have worked decades in the industry. They're coming in and super excited about play to earn and blockchain games, but they're very light on tokenomics. So I think eventually, especially in the next, I would say 12 to 24 months, these will converge as the kind of crypto people and the games people find each other and start forming teams. I myself, I've been long in the gaming space, but I'm also considered, I would say, one of the pioneers in the NFT space. But yeah, I think these skills will start to merge, and we won't be asking that question anymore, like 2 years from now.
hmm And maybe you can elaborate a bit on NFT space, like where did you get involved in NFT space? What was the evolution of the space up to this point, and how it kind of connects back to gaming?
Yeah, so we were talking about gaming NFTs as early as 2018, but there's actually a lot of different use cases that came out before games. So, of course, collectibles is the biggest one. CryptoKitties is a collectible. CryptoPunks is the collectible. And collectibles are, I would say, easy to get into in that they're easy to deploy, and you just need to have some set of randomness and rarities, and there doesn't need to be a greater utility around it. It's really the scarcity and maybe the aesthetics and what the and what kind of community forms around it that determines its value. So if you've seen things like Bored Apes, for example, which have gone from zero to now a floor price of almost 30 ETH for the cheapest one, it's really fascinating how you didn't actually need any utility for these apart from social status and rarity. And that was a big surprise to me, coming as a game developer who thought that these NFTs would not be useful or they would not be valuable until you added some form of utility in them. So it turns out that the collectability, scarcity, and status turns out to be, in a sense, like more important to humans, right, in the short term than utility. I do think utility will also win out in the long term, but yeah, definitely surprised by the lesson on collectibles.
hmm And when it comes to also like metaverse and like enabling fully metaverse, do you also follow what's happening in like virtual world space?
Yeah, yeah. I'm more interested in the virtual worlds that have gameplay associated with them. So, Sandbox, for example, or Nifty Island, which is coming up. So, I do own some a plot of land in Decentraland and actually have my art gallery there. But an art gallery is not something that you visit all the time. I want to be able to go into worlds where I come in there and almost have a job, right? Like I'm part of a thieves guild, or I'm building a huge guild building inside this space. So yeah, can't wait to explore a lot of these virtual worlds.
hmm And to come back a bit to gaming, what kinds of things would you say are important resources for game developers who are joining the space and kind of like to begin with maybe a little bit lost for the ones who are coming from the gaming side, not crypto side?
Sure. I think the ones that will do best are the ones that are good at economy design. So of course, a lot of free to play game developers are good at economy design. I think that MMO designers will have the easiest time transitioning to play to earn and blockchain games because they've already been designing these systems for their MMOs. The big difference is that you they're meant to be closed systems in MMOs. You can't cash it out for real value as opposed to blockchain, where the moment you make it a cryptocurrency token or an NFT, now people can trade it right anytime. So I think the biggest shift that needs to happen is that developers have to be okay with having players own most of the economy. And instead of an in-app purchase method where you're getting money directly from your players, players should be the ones trading with each other, finding value with each other, and owning most of the economy. And you'll be taking a small percentage of that as your marketplace fee, which is something that all of these games do. Axie, for example, has a 4.25% marketplace fee, and like some developers would be asking themselves, why would I go from IIP where I'm getting 70% to marketplace where I'm getting 4.25%? But I would point people to Amazon, where it went from selling its own stuff to enabling marketplaces to for other people to sell their stuff. It actually became much stickier with network effects. And now, because people are obtaining value, they're actually getting wealth from trading in your game economy. People stay around a lot longer. And very notably, Axie has like a 90% 30-day retention. So from people who start the game on the first day, that's unheard of in the game industry, and it's because like people really find value from owning their own assets and being able to trade them.
So it sounds like it might not be super intuitive for people coming from the traditional gaming space where they're used to kind of controlling the economy in a way, but maybe in their particular economy, maybe it's driven by like 1-2% of people, maybe who are like whales or something like from the traditional space, versus here you open up the economy, but actually the total market size of the economy, transactions, volumes is way higher. So maybe it's not 1% of people who like actually drive this economy. It's actually like maybe like 50. I don't know the number for Axie, but it's probably like large number of people who actually contribute to this economy.
Yeah, that's right. So we look at the game economies in crypto as more like GDP, like what's the GDP of Axie, right? Or what's the GDP of Sandbox? I think it's a more appropriate way to look at it.
hmm And also, maybe you can mention something about challenges of kind of balancing the gameplay with economy itself, because even back in the day, I remember with Diablo kind of introducing the auction and removing it. So there was traditionally challenges with balancing those two things. So how do you think about that? Because it's hard, probably.
Yeah, yeah. So balancing an economy is super hard, even if when you have economists on the team, because you cannot predict player behavior, and players will do what they do. And oftentimes, there's a lot of emergent behavior that you would never have expected. So scholarships, for example, was one of those really good emergent behaviors. The Axie team never planned them, but because the community discovered them, it enabled this kind of rocket fuel growth that led Axie to where it was today. But yeah, you can only control factors in the economy and see what the result is. You cannot really control like the end result, and that means like if you're tweaking certain factors in your economy, you might be inadvertently affecting some other things that you want to control. So it's pretty complex, and you need to have a good grasp of like data science, player behavior, for example, and be able to make some experiments as well on how it will do maybe on a portion of the audience. It's endlessly fascinating stuff.
hmm And do you also think that game development for Web3 is done closer with the community in a sense that you do things in more incremental fashion and kind of work with the community more so than before? Is that something that people kind of used to, or would you say it's pretty counterintuitive?
It's also very counterintuitive. So if you're a game developer, you're used to working maybe 2 years, 3 years, even 4 years in secret, and then only when the game is in beta does marketing start, right? And then the game comes out, and then either it does well or it flops. The interesting thing about blockchains and NFTs is that you're seeing the asset sale happen way, way, way earlier than the actual game itself. So what this happens is that you're able to onboard your players to the economy and give them a sense of ownership even before the final game. So this can be good, and this can be bad. Like, people can buy NFTs that become worthless later on because the game is never finished. But in the best case scenario, as we've seen with Axie, they released Land in January of 2019. Now it's August 2021. The Land gameplay isn't out yet, but the marketplace is working really well. And the Land has over 100x in ETH terms because people can see the the value that they are expecting from what they're able to do with the land. It's backed by a strong community. The devs have proven their ability to ship and iterate on product. So yeah, so it's a great way to bring community together even when the final product isn't out yet.
Hmm. Yeah, that's super helpful. And lastly, do you have maybe any last parting words for our listeners if they're like aspiring game developers?
Game developers coming in, I mean, it can be a little bit daunting because you have to learn what crypto is and how to apply it from your game. So I would say just be curious, download a lot of these games, play Axie, play Splinterlands, and it's still a time of experimentation. Like, that's what excites me the most, and that we've found a really good business model in Play to Earn that will probably be the dominant business model for the next decade. But that said, it's still super early. There's still a lot of room for experimentation. And I don't think there's like one model that works. And it's up to people to find out and experiment and find those different models that players will want to do.
Cool. Thanks a lot. Thank you for coming today.
Thank you, Sasha.